Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. This is part of our ongoing series of investor webinars for NextGen Scientific. And we're here because NextGen has an active capital raise underway. Rather than hand you a deck and hope you read it, we'd rather put the management team in front of you for an hour and let you ask them anything. So if you're new to the company, NextGen Scientific is the investment vehicle for a group of businesses based on a single plant. There's a clinical stage drug company called Genzada with 2 compounds in development for cancer and precancerous conditions. There is a supplement company, Hyatt Life Sciences, selling products and generating revenue today. And both come from the same research. And both sit under a parent company called Ionix. So in the next 60 minutes, I'm going to start by briefly covering the disclosures, and then I'm going to hand it over to Jason West, who's here with me. He's going to go into detail about how the company is structured differently than a typical biotech, the 2 lead drugs, milestones achieved, what's looking ahead, and all kinds of things. But we'll finish with your questions. And I'm bringing this up because not using the chat function here on Zoom, we will use the Q&A. So if you have questions, drop them in there anytime, and we'll get to it toward the end. So I'm Abby Kerr. I'll be moderating today's event. Ben DeScipio usually moderates. His contact details are here on the bottom. So if you have any sort of technical questions related to the investment structure, Ben's your man. So please do reach out. And we're recording, so if you didn't make it, you'll get the replay. Okay, so the disclaimers. It's on the slide, so please listen, and then we'll move on with the rest of it. The webinar is informational. It's not an offer to or a solicitation of an offer to buy securities. Any offer is made only through the company's private placement memorandum, so please read that. Much of what you'll hear today looks at forward-looking statements, which carry risks and assumptions, including the ability to raise money in any offering. Actual results may differ materially from the company, does not assume responsibility for accuracy or completeness. It's all on the slide. I think what's most exciting about this is the Reg A Plus disclaimer, which lets you know that right now it's open to accredited investors only, but there is a chance that the company will open it up to all investors in hopefully near future. So this is deemed to be a solicitation of interest under Reg A of the Securities Act of 1933. All of this is on the slide. Please read it in plain terms. If you are not an accredited investor, nothing today commits you to anything, and no one can take your money. The offer is run through Texture Capital, a FINRA member broker-dealer, CRD number 300853, acting as broker of record and not affiliated with the issuer. Okay, almost done. Lastly, this is a private early-stage company. The investment is speculative, high risk, and could risk the entire loss of capital. Units are liquid with no public market. Clinical results to date do not predict future outcomes, and most drug candidates fail. So talk to your legal, tax, and financial advisors. Jason is the Executive Vice President of NextGen Scientific. He is a lawyer by training and with a JD from Vermont Law School and an MBA from Northwestern's Kellogg School. So before this, he was the president and general counsel at Japan Chemical, where he ran the business through a long stretch of growth and then worked the transaction that sold it. He joined the acquirers board afterward. So he's taken a company through the entire arc from operations to exit with his own name on documents. At NextGen, he's helped to raise more than $70 million and runs the nutraceutical side of the business. He's also Gene's son. His brother Cameron is a practicing dermatologist and the company's COO. Cameron's specialty happens to be the exact field the topical compound is aimed at. So this is a company that previously built and sold a different business and now has chosen to build another one together. So Jason, with that, I will hand it over to you.
All right. Thanks, Abby. Appreciate it very much. So yeah, we are just excited to present, the information that we have developed thus far and talk anyone through any questions that they may have. But just the highlight reel here is we've raised $75 million thus far, and we have two compounds that are called clinical stage, meaning that they are at the clinical stage of development. They're in humans or have been in humans already. And that's a relatively rare accomplishment for a company to have their first two drugs right out of the gate make it to the clinical stage. And then we also have, as you mentioned earlier, our nutritional supplements division called High Life Sciences, which at the time it was really just to solve some problems for some people that reached out to us. But over time, we realized that there's a business model there, and so we commercialized the products, and now are in the process of growing that company out and through the maturation stages of development. So along the way, we realized that actually this is helpful to our potential investors and existing investors, because it's a company that can generate revenue for us presently while we're also waiting on the drug development to occur. And sometimes that can be very slow. So we want to try to make this a little bit less of a binary bet and a little bit more of an opportunity to win on both sides of the equation. And this kind of just talks a little bit, this slide, I think, just talks a little bit about where we fit or where we see ourselves as differing from the traditional biotech model, where somebody makes a bet on a single compound and then takes that development as far as they can take it. In our situation, we obviously believe that the drugs will ultimately succeed, but if they don't, we have High Life Sciences, the nutraceuticals division, as something of a backstop, if you will. And it's always a little bit of a zero-sum game in drug development, because you think you're right, and you make that bet 7 years ago, 10 years ago, let's say. You take it all the way through the development path, and then everybody's heard stories of compounds that have failed even in phase 3 trials because there was some unforeseen side effect. And that's unacceptable to us from an investment standpoint. So we said, all right, let's figure out a way that we can reduce this risk for the investor, and it also helps de-risk things along the way for us as well. So that's ultimately how we landed on our structure of our business is through that. So I'll start with Genzada here and just talk through a little bit of where we're at right now. We have two compounds, as I mentioned before, those two lead assets. One is an oral capsule specifically focused on a variety of different oncology-related diseases. It's in clinical trials right now at Virginia Commonwealth University for late-stage prostate cancer. There's about 800,000 new cases of prostate cancer every year in the United States alone, let alone globally. So it's a big market. Obviously, there's a lot of drugs already present there, but we can be additive to that and give the oncologist another tool in the toolbox to help address that disease, because it is highly differentiated, and it causes a lot of different kinds of problems along the way. The other asset that we have is called GZ21T. It's a topical cream, and the focus there is on a condition. It's called actinic keratosis, which is a precancerous condition. You spend a little bit too much time out in the sun, and eventually you may have those red lesions that show up on your forehead. Give it enough time, and there's a chance that will turn into squamous cell carcinoma. And so the idea is to treat that with our cream. Now, presently, there are two main methods for treating that in the dermatologist's office. Liquid nitrogen is probably the preferred method by the dermatologists. But not all actinic keratosis can be treated with the liquid nitrogen. And it also hurts. It hurts patients. And so there's sometimes a lack of desire on the patient's part to take that kind of treatment. But the alternative is a cream that's extremely hard on you, very much a burning sensation when it's put on. And as a result, patients oftentimes don't like to continue taking that product. And so we view this as an alternative to rather painful sorts of therapies, but we can be equally as efficacious. And so that's what we're going to be trying to prove in our upcoming clinical trial, which we are waiting on final approval from the Swedish FDA and the Dutch FDA. So that's where those trials will occur, is actually over in Sweden and the Netherlands. And the idea there being there's a large number of cases of actinic keratosis in those two areas. And so it should be quick for us to enroll patients on those trials. So that's where Genzada's at in a nutshell. And then Hyatt Life Sciences is, we think, a very unique nutritional supplement company in the sense that our products are actually all but one are patented, which is very much a differentiator in the supplement space. Most companies don't have a patent portfolio protecting their products. Ours are unique combinations and also unique results. And all of this, the picture on the left-hand side, all of this comes from the plant called Arum palaestinum, or black calla lily. It is a plant that grows wild actually in the Middle East. And that's really the genesis of both of these companies. And so it's been used in the Middle East for, best we can tell, about 11 centuries. We did a literature search, went all the way back to the 9th century AD. And this plant is actually mentioned in the essentially medical literature of the time for a variety of different medicinal uses, one of which is cancer. And in fact, there's a paper out there. I can't quote you chapter and verse off the top of my head anymore. I used to be able to do this, but there's a paper out there that talks about the use of this plant in the Middle East today. I think it's 22% of Palestinians with a cancer diagnosis actually use this plant. They prepare it as a tea in that part of the world. They'll just chop it up, brew it on the stove, lemon juice, garlic, olive oil, some of the things that are available over there, and then they drink the tea. So a little under 1 in 4 cancer patients will use this tea either as the primary therapy or in conjunction with chemotherapy. That's what caught our attention ultimately. Why on earth would this be still in use, continuous use for 11 centuries if there wasn't some efficacy to it? And so we started studying the plant. My dad, Gene, is he's a medicinal chemist, PhD medicinal chemist, and a synthesis chemist. And so he took the plant back to the laboratory, started tinkering with it essentially, and said, let's find out what molecules are present in this plant. And lo and behold, there were several that were just present, naturally occurring, just what the good Lord gave us in this plant. And they do in fact fight cancer. So we refined it, synthesized those compounds in particular, and that's what gave rise to our 2 drugs at Genzada Pharmaceuticals. But along the way, because we started our research by preparing the tea in the kind of traditional preparation method, we started realizing that people would like to use the tea, and it's now converted into a powder and encapsulated. So we started thinking about nutritional supplements as another business model that we could pursue along the way as well. So yeah, that's the 2 companies, I guess, in a nutshell, and how we got to your doorstep this evening. So
Oh, there's
I'll
so
pause
much to
there.
unpack there, right? I
Sorry.
mean, but there's so much to unpack there
Yes.
between, one thing that you didn't bring up that I find to be really interesting in the story is that your family brought the plant over from the Middle East and then went through the
Mhm.
whole. Can you talk about the process for being able to commercialize a plant?
Sure. On the supplement side,
Just to
or
work
just
with the
both.
FDA to be able to grow it in your greenhouses
Yeah.
and that.
Yeah. So the plant, our greenhouse operations are really all dedicated to the nutritional supplement. The drug is all synthetic. It's a full-blown synthetic molecule that we're just essentially replicating what we found in nature, but in very specific ratio to one another, and that's the drugs. Uh, excuse me. But on the supplement side of our business, it's interesting. Arum palaestinum, even though it's been used in the Middle East for 11 centuries, it was completely new to the U.S. food supply. It's new as an ingredient here in the U.S. And so we went through, a significant amount of testing, both in vivo and in vitro, and compiled our data, put it all together, and submitted all that information to FDA. And that's basically the process that we had to go through in order to utilize that main ingredient as a constituent in our nutritional supplements. That's a little unique, and in part, actually, somewhat informs the patent protections that we've been able to achieve. But it's also very unique in the sense that most supplement companies don't have to go through that process because it's just reusing old materials, maybe in a new way. This is completely new and completely unique to the United States. As far as I know, we're the only company in maybe in the world, but definitely in the U.S. that is approved and allowed to use this product as an ingredient in our materials. And so we have a little bit of a moat, I guess, of protection around us in that respect, because anybody that would like to try to replicate that actually has to go and do that same testing that we did as well. And it's pretty expensive. It's I think around $600,000 just for that testing. And so it gives us a little bit of uniqueness and separates us from the competition quite a bit. I would say this that probably 80% or better of the users of our main dietary supplement product are actually using it to deal with some form of cancer diagnosis. These are folks that, they'll just call us and tell us, hey, here's what I'm doing with this. Here's my scans. They actually share their imaging with us as well. And we can literally watch the progression of the tumors shrinking over the course of several months. It's pretty remarkable.
That's
So it's
something
been
that really stood out to me. A couple weeks ago, we were talking about this, and you said something along the lines of how encouraged you are about the clinical trials because of how strong the testimonials you're getting back from people, from real people. And you've sent me some of those videos. It's really remarkable. Anyway, I know they're separate from the phase 1 completed trial. But and you'll probably go into more detail in a future slide, but maybe you can just in quick sum up what phase 1 is supposed to cover, and what was observed in these early trials.
You bet. It was so our initial phase 1, they call it a safety study, and the idea there is to predominantly explore safety and make sure that it's actually appropriate for a human to utilize. Another name for phase 1 study is first in human trial, meaning first person to actually take that drug has to have some faith that we've done our homework correctly. And because up to that time, it's all been petri dishes and mouse models and rat studies and dogs and so forth. And then you extrapolate from there. So in our case, it was what's called a basket trial. So we took all tumorous cancers except for what they call CNS tumors, meaning essentially brain cancers, which are kind of an entirely different animal. So those So those tumorous cancers of all kinds, and then there was a few other parts, inclusion-exclusion criteria is what they call that. And so we found is efficacy across a whole lot of different biologically diverse tumors. We had one 34% tumor reduction, which qualifies under the FDA as a what they call a partial response. And it has to be a sustained decrease of a certain percentage for a certain amount of time. We achieved that, which again is rather rare in these kinds of trials. And then we also had, I believe it was 7 or 8 additional what they call stable diseases, meaning the cancer did not recede, but it also didn't grow. And that's also very unique because cancer grows. It's very aggressive, and that's one of the hallmarks of cancer is that you will see it expand and grow and spread. And so when you can arrest the disease and make it stable, that in and of itself is considered a victory. And so when we saw that against so many different kinds of tumors, that really caused everyone to look around the room and say, there's something going on here that is unique to this particular drug. It doesn't behave like other drugs that are on the market. You wouldn't expect to see efficacy in the way that we saw it, unless you can start thinking about it as what we've come to understand, and we still have more work to do to prove this out, but we believe that this is a unique mechanism of action. And fast forward a few years, and once the compound is approved for use on the market, we may actually be pioneering a new drug category entirely, called super enhancer modulators. And so it's a oncology term that really refers to controlling some genes and genetic processes that are upstream, if you will, of the normal genes that people are looking at when they start pointing fingers at the causes of various different cancers. If you're upstream of those and you control those upstream super enhancer genes, those kind of granddaddy genes as we think of them in-house here, you by definition are going to control a lot of the downstream cancer causing processes. So that's our unifying theory, and it is very unique. And if we're right about that, then that would enhance the value greatly.
So speaking of next steps, you were talking about the keratosis study, but what are the next steps for the prostate study?
So the prostate study is it's really all about enrollment, and this is as I mentioned before, it's a late stage. So these are advanced cancer patients. These are all stage 4 diagnoses, and these are kind of a very narrow sliver of the prostate cancer population in general. These are what they call castration resistant. So these patients have been chemically castrated as part of their prior therapies, and that has not worked. And so these are really tough tumors. But because it's such a narrow subset of prostate generally, it just takes a long time to enroll patients on that study. So basically, it's a waiting game right now, and we just have to stay the course and continue to enroll patients on the study as much as we can, and just wait for the results to come in as they will. Some of these trials actually can take 3 years or more in many cases, especially with these slower enrollment rates. And then on the 21T side of the equation, it's the opposite. That one should go very, very quickly once we begin. Actinic keratosis is very common, especially in Sweden and the Netherlands. Turns out they tend to be a little bit more pale complexion, and they like their outdoor activities, so they tend to get a larger incidence rate of actinic keratosis. And so we think we're going to be able to enroll patients very rapidly on that study, and we'll actually probably even though we're starting long after the 602 trial, 21T should actually begin and end inside of a year.
Here to
So
speak to this?
yeah, absolutely. This is, we see a variety of different possible outcomes here in terms of, this is probably the $64,000 question or more, about, how does an investor realize results out of this? It's all well and good to talk about, curing cancer and so forth, but we're not doing this for practice. We're doing this, for investors and also for the patients themselves. And so we think that ultimately there's probably one of three different likely outcomes. One would be big pharma, Pfizer, Merck, GSK. They take notice of what we're doing, and we cultivate those relationships, long in advance to let them know what we're doing, so that we can start to essentially generate interest in our development programs. And if they are satisfied with what they see, then they might acquire either the molecule itself, um, and then fold that into their existing portfolio, or they might like the entire company and say, hey, we're going to buy the whole shooting match. And that's one way that we think that it could occur. Another way is licensing. I like the licensing model myself personally because there's an upfront payment, and then as the company still owns the molecule, we would receive royalties, on the back end as well. So that's more of a continuing revenue stream for all of us shareholders. And then the third possibility is we just rig up and develop our own sales force and go out and start marketing the products ourselves. All of which, and if as a go-to-market, it would probably include, or would likely include, an IPO at that point as well. And so several different potential paths to monetization, if you will, of these assets, all of which is really very much a developing story. This is, I got to say, we did not set out to be in the nutritional supplement industry. Our focus and our goal when we started this project was to develop a cancer drug and focus on the drug business, pharmaceutical business. Just a little bit of I'll back up a little bit and say that we're in a relatively very, very not densely populated part of the United States, small town Kansas. And if you know anything about small towns, you know that there's no secrets in a small town. Everybody knows your business. And so when we started our research on this plant, and we started brewing the tea and trying to figure out what was in it, pretty soon some friends of ours, from town, they knocked on the door. They said, "Hey, we understand you're making this tea for cancer. Can we get a hold of some?" And they talked about a relative that was fighting a cancer diagnosis. And at the time, it was very early, and we said, "Look, we have no inkling that this should be effective for you or helpful, but you're welcome to it." And so we gave them a gallon. 1 gallon lasted approximately a month. So they came back a month later and said, "Hey, seemed like they're feeling better. Can I get some more?" And so we kept refilling that gallon about 3 or 4 more times. And I think it was month 4 or month 5, they came back and said, "Just wanted you to know that the oncologist said that he's in remission now. And so we appreciate you." And then all of a sudden, we started getting phone calls from all over the country. Because as it turns out, cancer patients are very communicative. They talk to one another, they share their stories. And so we started making about 40 gallons of tea a week and sending it all over the country. People would call, and if we had the materials, we would make it for them. And we know that it's not going to be harmful because it's been in continuous use for 1,100 years. So we know people can take it. But we didn't really believe that it was our material that was helpful. Pretty soon, it kind of dawned on us that there's a product here. There's a commercial strategy that we could pursue. What we didn't know at the time was that this is a $759 billion market. That's a really, really large space to be in. And it has been fueled predominantly by several things. COVID, I think, definitely is expanding the size of the market dramatically. Our experience during COVID and the interest in natural remedies and the maybe distrust of the drug development process is I think certainly involved there. And then the baby boomer generation is also fueling the growth as well. So turns out it's a good space to be in, and especially if you can be involved from a scientific standpoint, and you can talk about the scientific rigor that you approach the supplement space with, and that's what we think is something that differentiates us a little bit. Then this is a business that we think we can grow and scale rapidly. So part of the proceeds, a use of proceeds of our capital fundraising is to use it for some marketing efforts on the Hyatt supplement side.
Now, pretty much up until this point, we've been talking solely about cancer. What have been some interesting discoveries in the supplement line, and how has that led you to expanding the products?
So, it's interesting. We would get calls from people to say, I've been taking this Afia Plus product, which is the purple bottle on the screen here. And that's the main product, the flagship product, if you will, that most folks are using for cancer diagnosis. We don't market it as such. We call it cellular health. But it's interesting. They would call and say, I noticed that I don't have the joint pain that I had before. And so it caused us to look at the ingredient list again from a kind of a new vantage point, and that's where we developed then we kind of iterated on the ingredients and developed Arum Flex, and that's for inflammation because as it turns out there's a significant amount of anti-inflammatory activity in this Arum palaestinum plant, as well as several of the other ingredients too. Same thing with mental clarity. Same thing with glucose. So, and also the same thing with immune health. Since I've been using this product, I found that I haven't gotten sick. I haven't gotten the flu in 4 years. And my glucose numbers dropped so much that I was able to stop taking my metformin, my type 2 diabetes drugs. Fascinating stuff. And each time that they would call, we would say, okay, well, that's good to know. We appreciate it. And then we'd go back to the ingredient list and start looking through the studies that have been published about these various different ingredients. And sure enough, it caused us to look anew at things. And so we again developed and just added on to our product line based on customer feedback and just basically just listening to the customer. And turns out they'll tell you a lot. This is a really good picture, I think, because it starts to show that it's a very, very deep, deep purple. It almost looks black. And it grows, like I said, it grows wild. It just shows up in the hills of Jerusalem. And so we figured out how to grow it here in Kansas. This is very much an agricultural center, of course, as everybody knows. But this plant does not like Kansas summers or Kansas winters. And so we figured out that we need to build greenhouses. And so we now we have a commercial growing operation where we produce our own Arum palaestinum plants to source all of the needs of the dietary supplement business. Just a quick blurb here about the team. Gene is our founder, and he's at his core, at his heart, he's a chemist. He loves to be in the lab, loves to tinker, loves to create new compounds. And so that's actually where he spends most of his time today is developing new compounds. So we have we haven't talked about it thus far tonight, but we do have a whole pipeline of additional compounds that he's been working on, for antibiotics, diabetes, and a variety of different, uses or potential uses. Stefan is actually, he's our resident drug discovery and development expert. I would say he's been involved in a number of different previous drug development businesses, and brings a lot to the table in terms of his knowledge of the rigors of manufacturing drugs in particular. And then my brother is he's a dermatologist and dermatopathologist, meaning when people have really, really difficult cases, he actually, they send the skin samples to him, and he'll actually get them on the microscope and help diagnose what the issues are. So besides oncologists, dermatologists actually see more cancer than any other physicians. And so that he's very familiar with cancer biology and very knowledgeable. And that's actually turned out to be very helpful. I won't tell him that because he's my brother, but it actually has been very, very helpful.
I had such a great conversation with him a while back. I found it really interesting because he's a teaching professor at a university hospital, isn't that right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
hmm Okay, good to see the team. If you missed other investor webinars, Gene is so engaging when it comes to talking about the chemistry, so that is worth a look back. Anyway.
It's interesting. One thing I just wanted to point out here is there is a way to utilize some of the 401k monies if you are looking at making a change in your investment portfolio. You can actually swing some of the 401k monies and as well as the IRAs over. And that's something I didn't know when we first started this. So if there's an interest for anybody to take a look at that, I know Ben DeCipio has a lot of the information about how that can be done. Obviously, your own wealth managers would be a great place to start as well.
Well, with that, I believe we can turn it over to the Q&A. I've gotten a good number of questions in throughout the
Oh, great.
presentation myself.
Excellent.
mhm. But let's see, one from the crowd. You talked about it during the presentation, but can you give people the scoreboard? What's already been done and what's next?
Mhm. So the way that the drug development work goes, it's basically preclinical work. That's all done, and I say done with an asterisk. Let me add that little asterisk there. They say that preclinical work is kind of never done because you always go back and do additional testing or studies, just to additionally, clarify the molecule or identify more in terms of the mechanism of action. But those are look back kinds of studies. Right now, we're in what's called phase 1B, which is we've identified the safe dosing levels of both the topical and the oral capsule. And then the next step is to, on the topical side, is to conduct that trial in Sweden and the Netherlands. And the nice thing about topical drugs, let me just kind of focusing on them for a minute. You don't have quite as much in the way of follow-up testing to identify whether or not you've achieved success. It's very practical. You just look at it and say, did the lesions actually shrink or not? And so it's a much faster route to drug development completion. That's what I like about the topical, because there's a possibility that we could monetize that within, I would say, conservatively 18 to 24 months from today. So that's kind of what we see happening with the topical drug. the next step for our 602 oral compound is to complete the trial, prostate cancer trial. And with the proceeds of the capital raise that we're conducting right now, we also have in mind to open up new fronts in terms of testing protocols, trial protocols. So we'd like to explore pancreatic cancer. Actually, we have a lot of clinical or preclinical evidence to suggest that there's efficacy against pancreatic cancer. That's a tough one. It's a very difficult disease, and if we can be helpful there, boy, that's a real drug very quickly. And there's several other indications that these are relatively rare cancers that we saw efficacy in phase one. You think sometimes in terms of what's the patient population. If it's a rare cancer, you may have an opportunity to pursue some fast track designation, some enhanced speed that is allowed in terms of review by the FDA. So that gives you kind of a leg up because speed is the name of the game, obviously, in drug development all the time. And then on the other hand, the rare cancers are pretty small in terms of market size. So you also think in terms of those larger patient populations like prostate cancer, breast cancer, colorectal, and so forth, all of which we would like to explore given the additional funds. And so that's what we have in mind for that. For Hyatt, next steps actually would be to commercialize the products in foreign jurisdictions such as India, as is a great example. I like India in particular because our products, based on everything that we've heard from our advisors, would qualify as Ayurvedic medicine in India, which allows us to make health claims. So we can talk about glucose, we can talk about cancer, we can talk about diabetes and so forth in India. And that's something that we can't do in the United States because of the way that our rules are written. So it's a bit of a gag on us in terms of our ability to speak about the products in the way that we would like to. But India, vast in terms of population and also significant populations of the various different conditions that we think we can treat and help.
How did you start moving in that direction, Jason? Can you tell me about
So yes, actually, one of our he's a gentleman who did a lot of the preclinical work for us at the University of Kansas Cancer Research Center, and he's actually from Calcutta, and he's an Indian national, just a gem of a man. But Dr. Dar, who's very familiar, obviously, with the Ayurvedic, medical traditions in India, and he looked at the plant and also looked at our drugs, and so he's probably got as much knowledge as anybody about all of the molecular aspects of our drugs and our supplements, and he got really excited about it, and so. Me and him actually made a trip over there, and we started to investigate the possibilities of commercialization in India. So, if we proceed forward, we'll definitely be leaning on Dr. Dar and a lot of his contacts over there as well.
interesting?
Yeah.
We have a question here about the mechanism of action. And you said earlier that it could potentially lead to a whole new class of cancer drugs. And the question is related to, they're referencing the market, how the market is growing in epigenetics. So, but there's a question around, can you tell us a little bit more about what the mechanism of action is, what has been published, where do you fit in the mix, and why are you encouraged it could be a new class of drugs?
Yeah, it's so I think the super enhancer modulator activity was, I think, first identified in about 2013. And this is a great question because there are so many unknowns. But what we think we know right now is that so far there's no super enhancer modulators on the market. It's just not a drug that is, we hear about immuno-oncology, Keytruda, Opdivo, and so forth. but there's no such thing as a super enhancer modulator on the market right now. So that's how we know that we would be a new drug category. If you think about the strand of DNA, the double helix, there are sections of the DNA that are called essentially super enhancer regions. There's just these areas where the super enhancer genes reside along the DNA strand. Those super enhancer genes control other genes. So their whole process or their whole purpose of existing is to control these other genes downstream of them. And then those genes then in turn control various different processes that whether it be apoptosis, the pre-programmed cell death, meaning the cell divides, it grows, and then lives out its life cycle, and then it's supposed to die at an appointed time. A lot of times, cancer will hijack that process, and the apoptosis switch gets turned off. So now all of a sudden you just have cells proliferating and proliferating, and suddenly you have a tumor, and then that tumor takes on a life of its own and starts to send out signals to other cells to create a circulatory system and bring nutrients and oxygen to it and so forth. So if we hit the super enhancer genes, we can affect both apoptosis and prevent or start to retard the effects of the tumor creation itself, the tumorigenesis, if you will. But we also can affect those processes and those genes that start to control the creation of the blood supply of an existing tumor. So we're hitting that tumor. We're both preventing it from occurring if we can reestablish apoptosis, but we're also hitting it and preventing it from feeding itself and growing further by virtue of that the blood supply and kind of taking over those signaling pathways. And so this is a tough one. It took us months to actually kind of noodle through this one.
Sorry to dig into the weeds of the genetics behind it.
It's fun, but boy, it was a head scratcher for a long time for sure. So we finally figured out though that there are genes that just naturally start to help your body fight cancer. Those are called tumor suppressor genes. And then there are genes that naturally tend to cause cancer, proto-oncogenes. The super enhancers actually, especially the ones that we seem to be affecting, are upregulating or kind of boosting the tumor suppressor gene. And we're also downregulating or kind of tamping down the proto-oncogene, meaning we're accentuating the positive and we're eliminating the negative. And we're doing both at the same time, which is really, really unique because most drugs just focus on let's make the immune system work better, and it allows it to target the cancer cell more readily, and it goes and finds it, identifies it, and then the body takes over and fights and kills it. Ours is, I don't want to say more elegant, it's just different in the sense that we're kind of that 1-2 punch, if you will, but we're controlling it from a distance. So for that reason alone, and this kind of again goes back to the idea of why might a big pharmaceutical company find us to be very attractive, is because our drugs should pair well with a lot of their existing drugs in their portfolio. And if that's the case, we're right about that, then it makes their drugs more valuable, makes our drug more valuable, and everybody wins. The long answer to a really short question. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I personally find it really interesting. So, and it seems like it is a major differentiator. So it'd be nice if people are considering it as an investment opportunity, it would be, I think, important to understand. Coming back to the use of funds, right? So obviously you're very passionate about what it can do, and you've seen a lot, so you forged a path forward. We've talked about the very next steps, but I guess we're getting toward the end of our time here together today, and I'm wanting to kind of speak to why now?
I think I think it all boils down to 21T. Why invest now? Is that what you're
Yeah,
getting at?
why invest
I
now?
think if if we are able to commercialize 21T, and it's hard to put a number on what that value of that drug could be because it's probably a little too premature to do that right now. But a lot of these drugs are hundreds of millions of dollars, right? If not into the billions. But on the conservative side, and because it's a topical, it's probably measured in hundreds of millions. Um, you're investing kind of at the end of the race, if you will. It's kind of like if you go to the horse track and you make the bet, and the horses are about 10 yards from the finish line. You kind of know who's going to win. I hope that is kind of similar to what we're doing here. And I hope that we're close enough to the finish line with 21T alone that this can be a winning opportunity, investment opportunity for all of us, new investors included as well.
Okay, well, investinnextgen.com is the website where you go to learn more about that. I'm going to drop it in the chat right here so everybody can see it. And um, absolutely available for your questions. Ben DeScipio is the main person over at Texture Capital. He'd be delighted to set up a one-on-one phone call with anyone who has particular questions. Jason, I'm going to leave you with the last words here. I know you've been working at this for a long time. You're in this company with your family. You built this to it's a third party independently evaluated it as over $300 million value as a company. And now you've invited investors to join you after you've already gone through a couple of these early clinical trials with what seem to be very encouraging results. So, and we're at the brink, we're going to be inviting all investors here pretty soon to join on the Reg A Plus, which means a much lower minimum. But really, what wakes you up? What still gets you excited about the company that you've built?
Boy, that's a tough one to narrow down.
Mm,
I would say that what's very interesting to me, and this is, I wish I could say that this was intentional on our parts and it's very strategic right from the very get-go. But in reality, I think chance favors the prepared. We get to both develop drugs that allow people to respond to an already terrible disease, but we're also doing something to help people prevent, we hope, from getting into that situation in the beginning, in the first place. That's a really unique scenario. I don't know of any other companies that are doing that. So that really gets me up and gets me out of bed in the morning. It's not hard to come to work every morning. And I just, it's a challenge. Every day is new, but that's something that I like being in the fight in that way in particular. I think that's a lot of fun. And it's also very gratifying. You see people coming in the door all the time and they're in trouble. And a few months later, they come back in the door and they're in remission. That's a major switch in somebody's life. And if we can play a role in that, and if investors want to play a role in that, come on board.